immigrants and to be successful in their wealth building. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And now I move to Deb Broberg, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, everyone. And it's great to see some familiar faces in our virtual room and a few folks I haven't yet met. So I'm honored to be here and have this conversation with all of you. I have the opportunity to lead an organization called RealTime Talent, which was formed in late 2015 here in Minnesota to fill a void and have an entity that's focused very intentionally on real-time labor market analytics. And our mission is really to accelerate the alignment of the workers in our marketplaces with the jobs that employers are trying to fill. So I loved the data we saw. Ose, I loved your comments too, right? Because it's powerful. And it really reinforces what Real-Time Talent's data has said long before the pandemic arrived. Because to be clear, this is not an opportunity population that we should begin to acknowledge and value and welcome. This is a population that has truly been contributing to our communities and our economic thriving and ability to provide great careers and living wages for folks long before COVID-19 arrived. So I've been in this role since the beginning of 2018, and prior to that had the opportunity to work in various HR leadership roles in business. So I'm here to represent somewhat big businesses because that is really where my career path has led me up until 2018. And it's just been a real treat to learn literally every single day more about the workforce development space across all regions of our state and all the great resources and entities we have to tap into. I think now the power is in understanding how to be more strategic so we can truly ensure that our immigrant and refugee communities are feeling valued and welcomed. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you, Grace, for the invitation.
Thank you, Deb. And finally, we have Dr. Miata Gatawe. I'll have you introduce yourself and your work.
Thank you. My name is Miata Gitawe, and I lead the African Immigrant Professional Development Conference. So this is a conference that started in 2018 based on the results of my dissertation on how African immigrants attain managerial success. So we used that to develop a conference in 2018, where we brought in speakers to share their experiences as well as employers. And then over the years, we've had 4 conferences. And just this year, we are launching our first mentorship program next week in partnership with Best Buy and Leno Lakes. I also work as the Associate VP of Human Resources at Luton Social Service. And again, like I'm trying to create opportunities just as we deal with workforce challenges and how we can focus on bringing more diverse people into the organization. I'm happy to be here. Unfortunately, I had to miss the first part because I had a meeting, but I'm glad I can join and be a part of this panel.
Thank you all so much. We're glad to have you here. And again, if folks have questions throughout the event, please feel free to just pop those in the chat. So I think to get us started, obviously, as we talked about in the main panel, the whole purpose behind the Journey to Belonging report was to kind of create the starts of that roadmap to how to make the Twin Cities a more welcoming place for immigrants and refugees. And obviously the component of that plan that the Chamber is deeply invested in is those workforce and economic development recommendations. And throughout that planning process, as we were putting together those recommendations, we heard a lot about what some of those barriers that immigrants and refugees are facing as they try to enter the workforce or as they're navigating the workforce. And that is a lot of what those recommendations are specifically targeted towards. But we know we're super fortunate that we've been able to spend that time gaining that extra knowledge, and that not everyone gets to be able to be a part of those types of conversations. So it'd be interesting to hear from all of you. Ose, maybe we can start with you. What are some of those common barriers that immigrants and refugees are facing, whether it's just trying to get into the workforce period or as they're trying to move up and navigate their workplaces as well?
Thank you so much again. I definitely am excited to respond to this one because I work a lot with recruitment and bringing workforce into different companies and organizations. And I think the biggest first barrier is just knowing where and who to connect with. I feel a lot of our immigrant and refugee population don't really know how to get that first introduction or have that trusted partner to get them into the hiring process. As we know, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. And it's very challenging when you're new here and you're trying to establish your career and just navigating sometimes the application process. You just get put in a pool with everybody else. So my role has really been to help them get introduced to various different HR managers and to create ways where we can have informal conversations and introductions to then build a relationship to lead to the interview process. Because as I've done that with employers like Medtronic and so forth, I found that once they see the value these talents have, they're all ready and willing to take them into interview process, but it's about making that connection. So I think what helps a lot from the employer perspective is making sure to meet immigrant and refugee talents where they are, finding ways where we can have informal conversations and connect with communities like Miata's organization, for example, where she has a talent pool. What are ways that our employers can really help to connect and make sure that we're having initial conversations and dialogues and setting aside opportunities, particularly for these groups? Because once they have that trusted partner, which are going to be our HR representatives, that's really helping them to have a bridge to get to these organizations. That's a major barrier I found a lot with the population I work with. In addition, I work with a lot of sponsored candidates, and I know that was a question brought up in the first forum. And it's very challenging, as we saw in the data that was revealed in the previous section. STEM roles are a need, and all the candidates I work with are STEM related, but the problem is that employers are somewhat not knowledgeable of the immigration process, or there's so many barriers with that by the time students, and if you're not familiar with sponsorship, is having a work visa to work for an employer. And I find a lot of my talent get to a place where they are able to work with employers within the collegiate role when they're students on F1 visas, but when it comes time to get sponsorship, they're kind of left in the dust. And that's the unfortunate piece. They bring so much value. We need these roles filled, but a lot of employers, again, are not educated or they're afraid. And there are some challenges with sponsorship, but I think we need to get creative to really help to make sure our workforce is not declining. And ways to do that is through sponsorship. So I do hope that we can find ways on the state level, working with the chambers of commerce to find ways to remove some of those barriers for our highly educated immigrant talent who need visas. So those are some of the main things I face. Thank you.
Miata, maybe we'll go over to you next, since this is a space that you are navigating every day as part of your job.
Yes, thank you so much. I would say, in addition to what Ose said, I agree with everything. She's spot on. You know, I see the devaluation of African immigrant skills and experiences. And I would just say, but I would speak mostly to African immigrants because that's the group that I've worked with. And what we see that a lot of African immigrants are highly educated, come with experiences from back home. But once they get here, there's a push to find job right away. And there's also a push to get into a specific sector. You know, we see a lot of immigrants in the healthcare sector are working jobs that are not comparable with the skill set. So we see that as a challenge because when you come, you have to figure out, do I want to feed my family or do I need a job right away? So after maybe the first or second or third time of not getting a call back, you know, people get discouraged. And for most employers, like, you know, they don't have that lens. So when they see maybe there's the resume is not, you know, it's not the format that you used to, or maybe there's something that you might see a gap in that resume. So I think with all proper training or ways for employers to look at that, will miss opportunities. And also like network, you know, again, it's not who you know, always it's not what you know, but who you know. And for African immigrants, we don't have that social capital. A lot of the people that we know are not in that network. So what we train participants in the mentorship program and through the conference is like, yes, it's comfortable when you go to work to stay with people that look like you, that talk like you, because it can be draining. You know, you have an accent, you just want to be comfortable, but equally so it's a two-way street. So teaching them how to form that network, but also asking managers to be proactive, you know, to be managers as mentors. And we come from this a culture that's high in power distance. So we may not be as assertive. The American way of doing things, you have to be assertive, you have to advocate for yourself. But if there's no one telling immigrants, African immigrants, how to do these things, then they're not reaching for those opportunities. So I think like as a group, as the conference, and as we partnering with Best Buy and Lennox, we just had a training, just creating that lens to see like, this is not just going to be an ordinary mentorship program. If you approach it that way, they're not going to be successful. So same for employers. If you're going to be working with this group, then you want to reach out to organizations that push strategies like, you know, AIPDC. There are other organizations out there that creating that dialogue to educate yourself, because Minnesota is losing out on talent, we're losing out on resources, and in the end, it's affecting our bottom line because we're not tapping into the pool of talent that we have. Thank you.
And Deb, I know you are living and breathing talent pipeline issues and opportunities every single day. So what are your thoughts on this one?
I have two thoughts I would offer. And the first is maybe the topic of conversation in the policy breakout session, frankly, Grace, but I just want to lift up the obvious in this employer discussion, because a big barrier to entry and fully maximizing skills for our immigrants and refugees is the inability to translate credentials, right? And so we at RealTime Talent did a study about a year and a half ago that was looking at this very issue. And I just think it's critically important for employers to start advocating and getting involved, because many entry-level jobs, like Miata just said, do I feed my family or do I what? I need a job. So many of these entry-level jobs are filled by highly educated immigrants and refugees that are blocking jobs that our Black and Brown and marginalized community members really need access to. So I think there's an advocacy element that creates opportunity for employers, and it's a huge barrier for our new Americans who could be contributing. Especially the healthcare space stands out to me because we need healthcare professionals at all levels, and we critically need those entry-level direct care workers more than ever before, right? And we've got people in those jobs that could be doing way more. So I mean, that's number one. Then number two, I think another barrier employers can be really conscious of and do some strong introspection is, what is your environment like once you hire new Americans, regardless of their credentials and capacity to do maybe other kinds of work, whatever you've hired them for. As employers, in my experience, frankly, to be honest, over decades, this is also not a new issue. Employers have been working long and hard to diversify their workforce, so they say, but they haven't often really done the hard work inside their own company to address what it means to be welcoming to people of all various backgrounds. And so if you hire someone who's a new American and you don't make it a place that's safe to use your English as best you know it, right, Miata? If you have a bit of a inflection and you know, difficult for some native speakers to understand, that companies need to be addressing that. So I know one of the things I've seen work really effectively, especially in larger companies where they have resource, is to provide ESL sort of courseware right inside your own company, because it has an added benefit of bringing together people who are different potentially than your historical employee base, and they start to build community and sense of belonging and support for one another while they're building their English skills even better than they are today. And that's just one example, Grace, but those are two things that come to mind.
And Deb, you led into my next question beautifully, because obviously there are some big policy, just like structural ways that people are hired, changes and the credentials that everyone has touched to that need to be addressed. And like we said, we have a separate panel that's digging into that. Not to say that that can't be part of this conversation, but I think it's important to as Deb was just getting at, to kind of talk through what are like the really easy things that employers can do, the really easy changes that they can make in their office culture to make those environments more welcoming to immigrants and refugees. And throughout kind of our engagement process, we've heard, setting aside rooms that are specifically prayer rooms, or being really conscious about food or the types of things that are served into the office. So maybe Miata, let's start with you on this question. What are some of those easy changes that employers could be thinking about making?
I think like something as simple as employee resource group. I think that's a good one because it's that sense of community, and we have that. We just started a Pan-African Employee Resource Group at LSS, and that has really helped the organization to have the shared experiences. Sometimes we meet and we just talk about some of the challenges and the shared experiences, like what they mentioned about the ESL. That's a really good one because it sends a message. It says that we care about you, we care about your growth, we want you to stay here, and we want to be part of that career development. I think a lot of times what I see is like African immigrants get into organizations and they don't stay because the environment is not welcoming. Especially when it comes to the communication. I remember I was in one job, and just the way that I wrote emails, I was just coming from Liberia, it was totally different, but no one actually said that to me. Like, like your communication isn't clear because the way in which you write it. It was a job that I left, but it could have been easily fixed. So I think even having a mentoring program to have people mentor people. So I don't think it's a one size fits all, but I think just being intentional and saying like, how can we create an environment that people from different culture would thrive? It's not just about happy hour, because it might be an American way, but for an immigrant to leave work and having, like I said, spend 8 hours just fitting in and then having to go to happy hour. So if you're making all of your decisions and building all of your relationships in that space, you're going to miss out. So I think being intentional and looking at the population and say, what can I do to make people feel welcome would be a good first step.
And you raised a good point that one solution isn't necessarily going to work for every employer, particularly if we are thinking about a really small company. They may just not have the resources to bring on additional staff or mentors or whatever it is. So maybe Ose, I'll twist the question a little bit when I pass it to you, which is, what are some of those solutions, obviously, that large employers can take on, but what are some of those ones that may seem more approachable to the owner of a smaller business?
Oh, I love everything Miata mentioned. And I would say, if we just sit back and honestly look at ourselves and what we look for that keeps us as a company, is being at a company who invests in who we are. So a larger company may be able to do some grand things that, smaller companies can and then can't. An example of what a small company can do is as simple as seeing, where is your immigrant population from? What can you do that will impact not only the population here, but their population back home? Maybe having a book drive, saying we're collecting books to send back to a country that represents our company. People love to work at a place that's invested in them. And to be able to do small little initiatives like that go a long way. The Brooklyn Park Police Department, it was years ago, did something really cool. They saw that they had a lot of librarians who worked within their community, and they really wanted to find a way to impact and let them know they're invested in them. They went to Liberia, they provided supplies for fire safety, they taught on fire safety. Of course, that's something a bigger company may have to do for the financial, obligations with that. But people want to know that where they work we spend most of our lives where we work. It becomes our family. They want to know people are invested in them. So find ways where you can tap into what's important to your immigrant community. What do they value? What can we do to help show our support beyond just the 9 to 5 hour? Like Miata said, everybody doesn't do happy hour. So find ways that you can meet your immigrant community where they are. If that's saying, hey, we have a Hmong population. We want to make sure that we're supporting that Hmong population by providing, books to their school. Whatever it is, find something just small, but it creates a sense of belonging and value. And I think that a lot of times we complicate this, and we have DEI departments, and we're like, oh, we made these numbers, we've hired these amounts. That's great and grand, but when you get into the workplace, what are you showing that you're invested for the long term for your community? And I do want to add too as well, to a point Miata made, with the ERG, all those things are great, but also ensuring that you're creating not only just mentorship, but sponsorship programs. And when I say a sponsor, a mentor is somebody who's teaching and training you. A sponsor is advocating and your cheerleader, and making sure when they're in those meetings with your leadership team that they're saying, hey, we want to tell you about a candidate we've gotten to know named Usa. She works in this department. She's dynamic. We want, when we're doing our people planning for 2022, we want to make sure she moves up. Connecting your somewhat leadership and being unique and fun with it. Finding white males to connect with Black females. Those are your sponsors. We're connecting you with this person. We want you to build a relationship. We want you to get to know who she is or he is. And that way you're authentically getting to know people and you're advocating and promoting them. And this can be from an entry level job all the way to our corporate sector. Find ways to really create value and let people know you care. Because the sponsorship program, and particularly, I was on a forum and they mentioned that when they created this sponsorship program between African-American females and Caucasian males, they talked about things about life, about hair, how we feel about hair as African-American females. When people tried to touch their hair, it became something where we related and understood each other. And I think that if we can find ways to just make it simple and think about things like that, you will see so much barriers removed, and you'll have people invested in where they work, the immigrant and refugee population. You'll see them bring more people to the workforce, because people always, especially immigrants and refugees, will send referrals when they feel like it's a place that they're valued. And we'll see some of the changes that we need in our labor force. So that's just my contributions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Deb, I know you kind of teed us off with this question, but I'll circle back to you just in case any other comments sparked other ideas for you.
Well, I just really applaud what I hear from both Miata and Ose. And I think many times as employers, especially if you're bigger and have more people, more different channels within your business, so easy to over-engineer this, right? We make it so hard. And many times it's pretty straightforward. We're all humans. We share a lot of common values and needs. And I think employers who take the time to understand, look back at where you found your workers, where are you sourcing your talent, to understand where you're having success and maybe where you're missing some opportunities, and then foster those communities feeling welcome. We used to see, for example, a real easy thing, right? I'll say have potlucks, bring food, have a monthly potluck where you recognize the different food cultures and backgrounds of the people in your workplace. Or I love the mentoring and, more importantly, sponsorship comments that were just made by Miata and Ose. And I would say even more than that, I've seen what we used to call reverse mentoring work really well. So you get your often white male leaders in large corporate environments, or any companies. Industries tend to have their profiles too for who's in leadership, but reverse mentoring where your leaders who often don't know technology and don't understand cultures of people that are now available in the workplace, mentor them up with your more junior employees. And the learning is powerful for both parties. And it really helps embed the belief system that differences matter and make a difference. And then thirdly, I would say, have your leaders and managers be told and educated on the data. If they just realize that we don't have birth rates occurring at the standards that would maintain the number of workers in the marketplace that we've had before, I mean, just the data from running a business perspective, any manager or leader should get the fact that they got to do something different. So that's what I'd offer, Grace.
So to this point, and we've gotten a couple questions in the chat about this, and I'm going to try and weave together into one question. But employers are often looking for resources to tap into, whether it's, we've gotten a question about how to help prospective employees get high school diplomas from their country of origin, or the process to verify those degrees or transcripts for universities outside of the US, that tends to be kind of a cumbersome process. So I know all of you work in this space a lot. So what are some of those resources that businesses can tap to help them navigate some of these changes? I'll just throw that question out there and let folks get started if there's something that jumps to mind right away.
I would say we just started talking to the World Education Services West. I think they have a program that helps with degree verification. But LSS, what we've also done with our job descriptions, like looking at those requirements and asking, do we really need a college degree for this job? So just because that could not only be barriers for immigrants, but also for people of color, and looking how can we incorporate lived experiences. So I think West is a good resource that we're starting to work with and will be helping conference participants. So that's one of the group that I would definitely recommend.
I'll just add to credentialing agencies and building relationships with them. Like Miata said is one. I work with agency CGFNS, being that I deal with sponsored candidates. A lot of them have to go through verifying education, verifying their credentials. And it was definitely a very frustrating process, and it slowed down a lot of the candidates who were trying to come into the workforce here. So we really started to build relationships with the president of CGFNS and through Rally partnership with other recruitment firms, just saying, hey, this is really causing so much frustration. They really looked at the policies and found ways to say, okay, we can have pending approvals and let people move forward with processes while we're waiting to still verify. And they ended up, it's still a challenge, and I totally agree with all those who made those comments, but you just have to find ways to really partner with credentialing agencies and really hope to push and rally your team, so other employers, and say, hey, this is hurting our workforce and what could we do? And I think with those partnerships and really working with those credentialing agencies, they're willing to change policy if enough people are voicing it. So we just have to come together and really work as a team to voice it and find ways to navigate some of those issues. So that's just my contribution.
And I'd add as well, DEED is always a really excellent resource. This is what the Office of New Americans is going to be structured to do. And this is work that DEED is already doing. And we at the Chamber are always happy to facilitate those connections as well. Deb, I'm going to change the question a little bit when I give it to you, because something that you and I have talked about is the importance of collective cross-sector action. So that is going to be able to allow groups of employers to kind of really dig into their processes, so they have a more unified ability to help teach and educate each other about how to do these things well. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And this builds on what Ose was just saying as well, because there's power in more voices, right? So from an employer perspective, most employers are pretty used to trying to figure this stuff out themselves. And depending on how big the company is, they have different levels of resource and expertise, right, to do actual workforce planning. But we are in a world now where there's clearly a need for collective employer voice on a lot of these talent challenges, particularly for our new American potential employees. And there are ways in which employers can intentionally engage and work together to get your arms around your own hiring practices, your onboarding processes, your strategies for developing talent from within, your strategies for expanding broader talent pools, such as our new American population, critically important. And again, to the policy piece, the advocacy piece, helping shift our policy positions on what is or is not expected in terms of credentials. So I think collective action is just critically needed more than ever before. And what often happens, Grace just said it, right, is employers do many times have some good promising practices. Why not accelerate those hard lessons each one has learned to get into a forum where they can develop some trust with one another and help each other accelerate their progress? So talent pipeline collaboratives are one of the ways that can be done. Minnesota does have access to that framework. It's just something we're new at in our state, but other states are having really good success with it, which is why I've shared with Grace what I see to be some real potential opportunity, because employers can't solve this alone. And the talent pipeline framework I'm speaking of requires cross-sector collaborative solutioning, so we can co-design some different ways to fill jobs in our future and in the near term.
And one thing, we've been talking, I mean, obviously this panel is called Employer Solutions, so it makes sense why we've been talking about things that employers can do. But one of the things that came up and really struck me the first time that I was looking through the research report is the high levels of immigrant entrepreneurs that we have in the Twin Cities. And that is a huge value add when it comes to our immigrant and refugee community. So I'm going to ask the same question, but maybe shift it to more targeted towards what are some of those resources that immigrant and refugee entrepreneurs can tap. And maybe Osei, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to make sure I understand resources for them to tap to explore their more entrepreneurship opportunities.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, awesome. Yes. Oh, there's so many. As a small business owner myself, I really strive to help first my immigrant and refugee communities understand just what it is to really bid and the processes with that. And P-TECH has been a phenomenal resource that I send them to and work with them a lot. P-TECH, of course, is a free service that really helps to promote our small businesses to various different opportunities when it comes to getting certified and making sure that they own some of these certifications that really help to set them apart, like your woman-owned business status, your minority-owned business status, your targeted-owned business status. So I really help to educate my small business owners, especially the immigrant and refugee businesses, ways to set themselves apart by having some of these unique credentials. In addition to that, I think the most important issue that our population has is funding, and having, the opportunity to have funding to have some of those resources that can help them grow. And technical support is key. But with programs like Elevate Hennepin and so forth that's been available, I really also pushed my immigrant and refugee talent to get access to some of these programs that help them get services for free. So it would be so helpful for businesses to really look to engage some of our smaller businesses to scale up. I know Target has had an awesome program where they were able to really take on small businesses and help them look at things more strategically. I think that that's where a lot of our immigrant and refugee businesses struggle with the strategy side, just because they're trying to make their daily bread and grow their businesses. So I would say, taking a step further with small businesses online here that can help support them, is really looking at ways they can mentor and help grow these communities through partnerships and services they can offer, whether it's teaching an immigrant business how to market better, or just how to tap into some of those technical supports that can help them scale up. So thank you.
And we didn't even ask Osei to promote one of our chamber programs, but you went and did anyway. If folks are unfamiliar with Elevate Business, it's a really great online platform. As she says, it's free to use, so I encourage folks to go check that out as well. Miata, I imagine you work with a lot of immigrant and refugee entrepreneurs if they come through those programs. What are some of the resources you recommend?
Well, Chris, we do work with a few, but our focus really has been in the career development space. But I know like the African Development Center has a lot of good resources. I've worked with Nasibu, that we've worked closely, and we've had some panels where he came and shared information at the conference. But for right now, our focus has been primarily in the career development space.
Important work. Deb, anything to add on this topic?
Well, just to build on that need for funding, right? That's always so critical for startup business. So organizations like Connect to Capital, or doing your homework to investigate CDFIs, the community development funding institutions that are out there, organizations like MEDA, Women Venture for especially women-owned businesses, Small Business Development Center. There's just a amazing amount of resource in our state that often doesn't exist in other states. So that's the beauty of it. Then the downside is probably trying to navigate it all, right? Osei and Miata, if you're a new American like and you're trying to start a business, where do you even begin? But those are a few that I'd lift up, Grace.
Thank you. So we had gotten a question in the chat about companies who do multilingual environments really well. And I'm going to broaden that question a little bit just to say, because I think it's often helpful for employers to be able to model what they're doing after what another employer is doing. It's like what Deb was getting at with how we need to really be more collaborative in how we're approaching these solutions. So who are some employers that are tackling this work particularly well, whether it's offering a bilingual workplace or ESL services or whatever it is? And Miata, maybe I'll start with you because I know there are some employers that you work very closely with.
Well, what we're seeing with employers in the work that we do, because again, our target populations like African immigrants who most of them are bachelor degrees holder and they've been in the US for a little bit. So what we see like with employers like Lenolex and Best Buy is that intentionality and even Indeed to come into the community and recruit and meet candidates where they at. So for example, I would say the first year we had a recruiter from Indeed who came to the conference and recruited. And since then they have recruited at least 10 people through the conference in professional level jobs. So we see like that has worked because they have created an environment. So while they may not be multilingual, they have also created an environment where people from different culture can work and strive. So I would say that, and as well as Lenolex, like we've worked closely with them and they've done a good job with the ERG and the DEI platform where it's very intentional about reaching out to communities and being part of that planning process. And at LSS, we're also looking at a language access program. So how can we translate some of our policies and training into different languages? So we are in the process of doing that work at Luton Social Service, but it's like looking at other people, what they've done. And there are not a lot of resources out there, to be honest, or that I know of. But there are a few companies that are doing that, and we hope to be able to model that to design our programs to be more inclusive.
And Deb, I had seen you answered this question in real time in the chat, but if folks hadn't seen that, do you want to talk a little about the companies that you highlighted?
Well,
Deb, oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm on. I'm just thinking, I don't know that I answered which companies, Grace, because that one always makes me ponder, frankly. Different sectors are at different stages of their journey, I think, too, right? So yes, I lifted up Hormel and Jenny O because they've recently gotten an award. Now, I would certainly offer that I bet many of us think of those kinds of jobs as those entry-level, more manual production jobs. And yes, they are. Food production is messy business. And they also have really good professional jobs, too. So I think they've done some really good work to intentionally help develop and leverage people's previous training and education, maybe not because they have a formal credential that translates, but they have, as an example, been an employer that really has looked at their job descriptions. So what credential is really required to do some of those professional level mid-manager leadership roles? And I think that's the kind of work employers can do and accelerate their progress if they do it together with their competitors, because then you start opening a lot more job opportunities for our new American community members and others in diverse populations that maybe have had barriers historically. So yes, that's one, Grace, that I lifted up. I think financial services might be an industry that historically has, just speaking from my own experience, often relied on credential-based hiring when that is so outdated in today's economy and labor market that I see many of them, US Bank, Wells Fargo, a lot of the biggies have started to do that hard work inside their own shop to really evaluate their minimum qualifications and what their hiring requirements are. And it's taking too long. So that's another example of where a collective employer effort would make impact quicker. Manufacturing environments, we've got Murray with us. He can speak firsthand to manufacturing environments, but I think they too have come to realize, boy, we got to tap into our youth. And our youth is comprised often of immigrants and refugees and others who haven't had access to well-paying jobs. So, there's a laundry list of employers probably that are making good progress. I know there is. and we need to do more. So I guess that's what I would say, Grace.
Jose, I'm sure you have examples to share as well, or just thoughts. I've seen you nodding and agreeing. And
Yes, an employer that I've worked with closely is Medtronic, actually in partnership with Hired, who was on, so I don't see her on anymore, but they really understand, and they've been doing this before this became a thing. And I hate to say it that way, but I have to be honest. They've always figured out ways or tried to figure out ways to engage immigrant communities, and particularly they've targeted youth. I've done programs where they've said we want to help youth communities. They have overlooked things that are documented issues because they're like, let's just give a chance and see, and they've been successful. They work well with immigrant communities internally and find programs to help them scale up. So when it comes to tuition reimbursement and the relaxed work environment, you can leave and go to school, come back and finish your shifts. So that way they're creating an environment where they're taking those immigrant and refugees and somewhat helping to promote them when it comes to their education and their family structure, having very unique work schedules in order to make sure that they scale up, and then they can become leaders for tomorrow. So I think when it comes to Medtronic, they've done an excellent job. They continue to find ways, and they're still working on it, ways to really help to promote youth. But they're a really great one if you want to model behind and learn more. Jennifer Johnson and Julie Brecky Hired have been wonderful partners in ensuring we're really helping to promote youth, and Medtronic has been fantastic with helping to promote immigrants and refugees within the workplace.
thank you. And as we're getting closer to the end of our second hour, I think I'll maybe ask my last question, and then I'll open it up since we're a slightly smaller group. If anyone has any other questions they've thought of. So to kind of just tie things nicely up in a bow for why we've all been here today, love to hear from all three of you. Is just, what is the most compelling case that we should be making to the business community as to why this kind of work should be prioritized, why we should be making our workplaces more welcoming to immigrant and refugees? And I mean, I don't want to put a negative spin on it necessarily, but what are the consequences if we don't prioritize these type of changes? And Nyata, maybe I will start with you.
Well, I would say my background is in business, so I know business people usually understand how things affect the bottom line. So for me, it's like companies are losing money. If we have someone who's an accountant and working in direct service, it's like they're not maximizing their potential. They're not working in ways that are innovative, and it's not helping your bottom line. So I think for employers, I think looking at it that way, because we know research shows that having a diverse workforce increases productivity, leads to more profitability. So if we can make a business case and employers can see that you are sitting on a gold mine of talent because you are looking through one lens, viewing someone based on maybe like their accent, or maybe because they have a foreign degree. But if you start to be intentional and create a welcoming environment, how would that lead to more innovative ideas? How would that lead to better recruitment strategy? As Jose said earlier, with immigrants, when one person comes, you see they'll bring everyone else. That's why we see a lot of immigrants in the healthcare field, because there are recruiters. So we could be recruiters, first generation Americans, new Americans could help you with your recruitment. And when they come to, most of them stay. Like I see people staying in jobs for like 10, 15 years. And I was like, don't you want to try something else? But they build that family, there's that loyalty, and that commitment. So I would just say for businesses, look at, how that will help you, and look at it more as a business strategy. So even though it will be good for those communities, but it's also good for business.
Jose, what are some of the strategy or arguments, I should say, that you've made that you found very successful?
Yes. Miata pretty much said so much of what I would say, but I always have to come from my sponsored candidates, my students from abroad, just really adding in, you're gonna tap in, the hope is that we tap into our talent that's here, the various diverse groups that are here, but we also still have a void, and it is that we have these STEM jobs that need to be filled. We have talent who needs to fill them, and we just can't keep up. As we heard earlier, our baby boomer population is heading out, and we need our workforce to not go into a decline. And we just have to be unique with the strategies we're using. So in addition to just tapping into the talent that's already here who are saying, hey, I'm able to do this job, I just need an open door. Find unique strategies like sponsorship, find ways to make it work. I know it's very hard when it comes to, the policies and some of the drawbacks with it, but it's so much benefits because you're allowing a unique and amazing talent to come here and be able to fill needs and do work that they're invested in. Like Miata said, when you have immigrant talent come into a workplace and they feel that they're valued, they will stay there forever if they could. And they will make sure that they bring such a unique perspective, and no workforce is going to be effective without looking through the lens of variety of people. So I think that we have to just be mindful that another point I want to bring up is immigrants are not just in Minnesota to do entry-level work. And it's been very frustrating for me personally. And I've had to really encourage my the employer partners to help them understand, I'm happy to support you to help immigrant talent do entry-level work and to get programs to pipeline them in. But how are we making sure we're pipelining them up? We need diverse leaders in companies. The leadership needs to reflect the rainbow. If you want companies to be successful and to not have to have so much litigation on things as race related, you need to have people in leadership who are going to be able to say, that's not okay, that policy's offensive. We need to make sure we're tapping in and supporting everybody. We need inclusive environments. You can't have that if it's not reflected. So I really want, employers here to just understand, let's get immigrant and refugee talent into the workforce, but let's not let them not stay at entry level. So thank you again for the opportunity. It's really been a pleasure to be on the panel with such amazing people like Deb and Miata. So thank you.
Thank you. And Deb, any final thoughts on this topic or really any of the topics we've covered?
Wow. Well, I would share Ose's comment. It's just been such an honor to be part of this panel. And I'll go back to what Miata started with in answering this question. Bottom line is good business practice. I mean, right? It just is. It's been shown in many research case. So yeah, it's good for business. But more than that, it makes going to work fun for everyone, right? And everybody's in a constant state of learning and assessing and making their own judgments about things. That's the way humans operate. So why not encourage inclusive, welcoming opportunities in your workplace, because that will flow into the community as well. It takes time, but people have to get to know each other. So not only is it good for business, it's just good for everyone that's in your business. And the bottom line, to the more downside of that question you asked, Grace, I would just remind all employers that you don't have to just be worrying about your immigrant and refugee employees. You need to worry about everyone right now in today's labor market. And if you don't make work fun and you don't pause to really start to understand everyone on your team and what makes them tick and how you can maximize the efforts of everyone on the team, you risk losing anyone of all backgrounds, because the good people will go. They've got opportunities out there in this marketplace. So I just think, that's stating the obvious, but work should be fun and purposeful. And you only get the most out of it if you're part of a team. So that's what I say is the real benefit.
Thank you all so much. I'll pause for just a second in case anyone has any questions they thought of at the last minute. You can use the raise hand function on Zoom. Otherwise, if there are questions you think about after the fact or resources that you're hoping to get connected to, Murray, go ahead.
From the middle 90s till the middle 2010s, I was at 3 different companies that did this, and those companies boomed, and at all levels, from entry level to engineers to lawyers from Russia that you didn't didn't have the benefit of coming here as a lawyer, so they became operators of machines and then became the bosses in the machine in factory. This really works. So I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Murray. And again, if folks think of questions after the fact, if there are resources that you would like to be connected to, you can reach out to me by email. That will be included in the post-event email that will go out to everyone. I also put it in the chat here right now. Thank you so much to our really, really incredible panelists for such a thoughtful and informative conversation. I'm so grateful for all of you taking 2 hours out of your day to join us today. And thank you to all of you for sticking with us for 2 hours on a Zoom screen, especially now that the sun is out. Even if it's cold, the sun is out. As a reminder, you'll receive a link to recordings of the keynote session and all 3 breakout panels in your post-event email. Those recordings will also live on the Minneapolis Regional Chamber YouTube page in case for whatever reason you don't receive the email. If you want to learn more about the Gateways to Growth initiative and read the Journey to Belonging plan, as well as those research reports we referenced, you can visit webelongmsp.com. This is our new landing page for this initiative. I put that website in the chat as well. And like we said, this work is really just beginning. Creating that plan was just step 1. So we really encourage folks to get involved, share your thoughts on how to make these strategies a reality. And if there are things that you see where you're like, this is what our organization is trying to do, we just need more resources to do it. Those are the type of things that we're looking to hear in areas where we're hoping to help. So with that, I think I will give folks 4 minutes back in their day. Thank you all so much for joining us. You're free to just exit the event. You don't need to go back to the keynote room. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday and hope to see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.